All right, so as we jump in, there are 5 major checkpoints that we want to look for no matter what position, because we're going to take a look, as Jess is standing here right now, from the anterior view. We're going to look at the lateral and the posterior view. In each of these, and with all of our assessments, there's 5 major checkpoints that we're looking for. So first off, just stand how you would normally stand, okay? Now, that alone is somewhat challenging for people because Jess knows right now, she knows she's smart, she knows she's being assessed. Okay, so there is always this battle of like, are you getting real information or do you say assessment and all of a sudden we pull ourselves in the perfect spot? It is what it is, right? So we're gonna go ahead and go with it and see what we find. The first area of the body we're gonna look at is the foot and the ankle, right? That's our first checkpoint. Then we're gonna take a look and see what's going on with the knees. And then we'll take a look at what we call our LPHC, this lumbopelvic hip complex. As you can see right here with our female pelvis, all the muscles that attach to this portion of the body. From there, we'll move up to what's going on at our shoulder complex. This also includes like kind of our thoracic spine. And then last but not least, especially from the lateral view, we'll see what's going on with the head and the neck. So the first place we want to start is from an anterior view. So as you guys are coaching your client to set up, just have them set up in a comfortable position. Again, in an ideal world, against a wall where you've got some frame of reference, but try not to overcoach them. Just tell them stand how they would normally stand, because that's where the best information is going to come from, is what kind of positions are they in all day long. And then from there, all you really have to do is start with your 5 major checkpoints. Now, just a reminder, as we go through some of the checkpoints and what we may or may not see from the anterior view, nothing automatically means that anyone's broken, all right, or that she's not going to be able to exercise. Really what we're looking for is we're looking for, first off, big asymmetries, especially from this anterior view. Are there any major differences from the left and right side of the body, especially in the sense that might relate to an injury that she's told me about, or maybe some exercises that I may need to modify or work around, okay? That's all we're getting is information. And the idea of doing this before we go into our overhead squat or single leg squat or push pull is we'll be able to kind of triangulate some of this information and just make better coaching decisions. So first place we're going to start from this anterior view is taking a look at the front side. And especially if we look straight on, right? If you guys have a good view there from the camera, looking right on, in a perfect world, there'd be this straight line going directly down through her head, through the center of her hips, and equidistant in between her feet, okay? Now, you're probably not going to be in a place where you have a plumb line and you're hanging a string from the ceiling, but just for you to visualize, because that's going to give you the idea of, are there asymmetries left to right side? And if we start from the ground, first thing we can take a look at is what's going on at the feet, all right? Where are her toes pointed? And you can see, because Jess is smart, she knows she's being assessed anyways, but we're going to uncover some things, don't you worry, is that her feet are relatively straightforward, right? You know what I mean? What we might look for, things that might be kind of what we call gross abnormalities, was let's say Jess's right foot was turned way out to the side, but the left foot was straight on, all right? So that would be an indication that, like, okay, there may be something going on with this right side. Maybe the body's shifting away from something. Maybe that's something I might ask about. Have you had any ankle injuries? So they're just opportunities to explore further, but you can go back to your normal, Jess. So we're looking for that relatively straightforward, okay? Now, again, what kind of information might we find? We saw, for example, maybe we have an asymmetry, that's one thing, but just point both toes out, okay? So as we look, you may find individuals who either maybe they've got some previous ankle injuries, maybe they have some tightness in the calves. Well, there's lots of reasons, even some tightness in the hips. Maybe it might be more comfortable for them to stand with this kind of toed out position. Okay, now not uncommon for a lot of people. And for a lot of individuals, somewhere straight on to like 10 degrees out, no big deal, that's pretty natural. But if someone was, even how Jess is right now, that's gonna be something that I'm at least gonna take note of. It doesn't mean anything right away, but it's something I'm gonna look for. And this is a great example. If you see this, for instance, in the static postural assessment, that's gonna be something you're gonna wanna look for when we get into the overhead squat. And you guys can check out the link in the description of this video for some in-depth information on the overhead squat, but I'll be looking for that same thing. If we see it here and we see those toes turn out in the overhead squat, now it starts to mean something to us too, because we've seen it show up in multiple places. But this just may have an impact on certain exercises. For example, if this is someone's natural position, then we know this externally rotated, because this rotation is happening up in the hips. Externally rotated hips, if that's more of a natural position for her, then we know as we get into certain exercises, especially exercises like squats, that may become a challenge, right? It may either limit our position, our squat depth, maybe it has to do with the knee valgus that we'll find in our other assessments. Again, this alone doesn't mean anything, but it's gonna be at least something that I take note of and I look for as we move into other things, okay? So let's go ahead and go feet back forward again. Aside from direction of our toes, maybe give us some information about the ankles and the hips. What we're also looking for is whether or not we have what we would consider to be like a normal healthy arch in the foot. Like right now, I'm able to kind of get my finger right underneath the inside of Jess's foot. So she has that natural arch. What we're looking for individuals that may become a challenge is if we have somewhat of like a collapsed arch, like the foot kind of collapses and rolls in. And as you can see, even as Jess slightly did that, the reason that's important is because with this kinetic chain checkpoint, if we have changes in this position, it's going to impact everything further up. So roll those feet in a little bit again, and right away you can see the knees kind of travel in. Okay, so this will be part of, and go back to our normal. You guys can, again, refer to the link in the descriptions for more information on what we call pes planus syndrome. I know it's kind of a funny word. I don't know who named it, but it is what it is. It has to do with the pes planus, which is this collapsing of the arch, because this is really important. The stable tripod foot is really important for stability and for us to track normally at the knee. If we have collapsing of those arches, it's gonna be very hard for us to keep normal alignment at the knee. So oftentimes you'll see that collapsed arch and the knees caving in and those hips being kind of internally rotated and adducted. So from the front side, those are some major things we're looking for. First, what's going on at the foot and the ankle? Are there any things that really stick out to us? And then from there too, is there any asymmetries? Outside of that, that's probably going to dictate what's going on at the knees. Are those knees traveling? Are they staying right over the top of this ankle, or are they in or out? Probably going to be related to that pes planus syndrome. And then moving up from there, you always can't see great things, I think, from the anterior view at the hips. Inside of your NASM textbook, they'll talk about, is there a hip hike one way or the other? I think we'll see a better view from the posterior side with that, but it could be something. Does anything stick out about the alignment of the hips? Outside of that, there's not too much else you can see from the front side relative to that LPHC. So what we do now is we move up to the shoulders. Now from the front view, you might not see as much about what's going on with the shoulder position, but I'll give you guys one cheat as I have my handy dandy colored markers here. Hopefully you guys can see these in the video. Now in a perfect world, and I'm gonna try to have Jess just relax and not think about it, just hold these in your hands, just like that, and just stand next to your side. All right, and squeeze them, there you go. Got it, just like that. All right, so she's pretty good here. You guys can see in a healthy shoulder position, meaning not externally or too internally rotated, those pens or those markers would point pretty much directly forward. And for her, they are, all right? They're pointing forward. Now, go ahead and rotate those pens in a little bit. Now, if you were to throw two pens in someone's hand and you see those markers, you know, if there was lines extended out, they'd cross in front, that would be an indication of this internal rotation that's happening mostly here at the shoulder. Now again, you can't see a lot until we get to the lateral view, but this will give us a good indication of what's going on internal or external rotation. I'm gonna steal your markers back. And the reason that this matters is not only because we're gonna be conscious of our shoulder position, and that should be this nice natural place, but here's the application piece of it. So let's say, for example, Jess is pretty internally rotated. You know, we can see the front of her hands as we're in the static postural position. That's pretty over-exaggerated internal rotation of the shoulder. Now let's say we go into our workouts and I have Jess do a shoulder press. Go ahead and put those hands up in like a field goal position. And I have her shoulder pressing from this position. Well, what I just did is I took someone who's got this internally rotated position, I put her into a stretched external rotation and now loading her with the weight in the exercise. So this information, just to give you an example, it just helps us also select better exercises. So I can already know that if I see that with Jess, well, hey, as we start doing overhead pressing, probably a better, more natural shoulder position for her is gonna be something a little bit more neutral because she's already tight in those areas. So just to give you guys some idea of like, what do we actually do with this? How might we actually use it? And we'll go hands back down to the side. Outside of that, those are the main things that I'm usually looking for from the anterior, right? What's going on foot at the ankle? Do we get any exaggeration of that pes planus syndrome where we have the collapsing of the feet and the arches and the knees caving in? You can see some height level of the hips and the shoulders, potentially if there's any gross exaggerations. For most people, it's not gonna be that large. And then when it comes to the head and the shoulders, everything generally you know, hopefully just looking for this natural alignment. Outside of that, the other checkpoints, we'll see a lot more once we move on to that lateral view.